Good evening, everybody. I hope everyone is well. Welcome to the third edition of Unnoticed Histories of Black Communities in Hamilton. Uh, we have some guests with us today. I wanted to switch it up. The first 2 weeks, you heard from me, and I had slides, and I was talking about history from the 1800s to the 1900s. Then we got into the 1900 to 1950. And so this week, we have two guests joining us. And next week, we will also have two guests joining us. So I'm flipping the script a little bit. So we have Mo and Aaron. And Mo, can you start us off with an introduction, who you are, anything interesting that you want folks that are tuning in to know about you before we start? And then we'll hand it over to Aaron to do the same.
Hi, everybody. My name's Mo Knaus. I'm a multi-generational Afro-American Canadian with native roots from the United States. My descendants would be Paul Cuffey and Michael Wayner, his business partner that owned a black shipping business back in the day. They did the Back to Africa movement just before the War of 1812. My family came to Canada around 1830s and have been here, moved from Otterville, Norwich, Oakville, Hamilton. I'm a member of Stewart Memorial Church. And yeah, that's about it for me. Passionate about local Black history, that's for
Okay.
sure.
Thank
I think
you.
that's it for me.
Okay, Aaron, you're next.
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Aaron Perry. I worked a good amount in the past few years on projects related to Black history in Hamilton. I created the Hamilton Black History database with ACA and HBHC. I also created deeply rooted the Hamilton Black History coloring book. And for me personally, I have mixed roots. My dad is Italian, but on my mom's side, my mom's family is Caribbean, a few generations back from Barbados and St. Vincent, as well as United States in Oklahoma.
Okay.
Uh,
All right. Thank you. So, the first two lectures I spent time kind of detailing uh how people of African descent uh left the continent and are now everywhere globally in the Americas. We talked about the Haitian Revolution. We talked about freedom seekers coming into different parts of what we now call Canada. We also talked about how all the different settlements across Canada um, were impacted by government legislation of the 1910 immigration law, 1850 Fugitive Slave Act, all of those things. So now, Mo, uh, I want to know you recently went on a walk. Could you share a few details of why you decided to take this walk and what does the walk mean to you?
Well, I took part. This is the second one I took part in. The summer, I met the walking artist named Ken Johnston, who's from Pennsylvania. So he had decided he was going to do one during Kwanzaa, and I think it's called. It's Heartbreak Week or something like that. It's a time when when the slaves would be off work essentially, and so they would orchestrate plans to leave and seek freedom to the north. Um, so there, he decided to do this walk from Detroit to Dresden, and it was called the Freedmen's Walk, and it was in honor of our ancestors traveling, and he wanted to do it in winter because our families traveled all year round to seek freedom and right in Canada. So I decided, yeah, I want to take part in it with him. So I joined up with him and went for the walk.
Where you mentioned from Detroit to Dresden. Did you start from Detroit?
Well, we did start in Detroit. Some of the bad weather, we couldn't do some of the walk, and the Gordie Howe Bridge wasn't open, so we couldn't travel over the Gordie Howe Bridge because we were going to walk into Canada. But we started at Second Baptist Church in Detroit, which was has some really deep roots with the Underground Railroad. I think it was over 3,000 people over so many years were actually moved through that church into Canada. After that, we went into Windsor and met some Elder Gail Carter there and walked around downtown, learned about Windsor. And then we walked to Sandwich that day and went to First Baptist Church in Sandwich, which is a National Historic Site. And from there, we walked to LaSalle and called it a day. And then we went to Harrow and went to Central AME, Central Grove AME Church. And from there, we walked to, was it Buxton? Buxton after that. We walked to Buxton, or no, Amherstburg. And then we walked to Buxton, North Buxton. And then we walked to Chatham, to the Chatham Black Mecca um, Historical Museum, and then into Dresden, which is the Josiah Henson Museum. And that was our walk. It was around, it was supposed to be 90 miles. Everything, Ken does things in miles. So it was supposed to be about miles, but I think we ended up walking about 120 kilometers or so just because of the bad weather and stuff, too. We actually had the opportunity, the liberty of being free to cancel some of our walk because of the weather. So we, there was the one day it was really bad. It was like that bomb cyclone. We walked in that into Harrow, into the Central Grove AME Church, and we had to stop. It was bad. Whiteout conditions in the field. So much respect to our ancestors. We planned what we wanted to bring. We packed suitcases or whatever, right? I was fortunate I was driving, so I packed a huge suitcase overflowing with all this gear. Ken and I talking, what are we going to bring? And, the liberty of having to choose and be able to dress for it, where our ancestors, they would have maybe had a deer skin. Who knows what they would have had for proper clothing, especially to travel in horrible weather, right? Our hands were freezing at one point. We're lucky. Take your hands out of your glove, you're crying. Like our ancestors, I can't imagine what they went through to going on that walk. I can't imagine. Cannot imagine. And for me, it was really powerful because it was the first time I'd actually been out that way. And a lot of my family is from Chatham, Windsor, London area. Um, so it was a special homecoming for myself. It was emotional. I was actually walking home for the first time.
Um, you know, in the first week during folks that tuned in, I did talk about the fact that uh there were many freedom seekers that settled all over southwestern Ontario, and other places. In doing the walk, um were there any like thoughts that were going through your mind in terms of, you've mentioned already that these are the pathways that our ancestors literally walked and ran and escaped, and imagined a better future for their children. Like, doing the walk, what were some of the things that you were thinking about? And did you at any point also think about what would be next for the future generations?
For me, my main feeling was community, um, and hope. There was hope. As soon as we got into Canada and we met some of the elders in Windsor, they were all family. They were all cousins. We were all cousins somehow, and at least one way, more than twice. In some people that I met, that we could trace our trees together and actually say, "Hey, we're related." The community, our community as Canadians, it was the strongest thing because we were segregated, right up until the 60s, and that's it always stemmed around church and the Masons, um, organizations like that. The church is the biggest role. That was our only place that we could gather and be safe. And that's why Stuart Memorial is such an important part of Hamilton's history. Um, the, with the Masons and having that fraternity and the Eastern Stars and being able to bring each other up in community. Even some of the stuff like you mentioned about the KKK rallies and stuff like that. Well, protests and stuff, or not protests necessarily, but our families would have gathered in the church to discuss where do we go from here, and what should we do, how do we keep ourselves safe, what do we do. When it came to work, same thing. So, and I seen that in that whole walk, and not just our families being here in Canada, but they went back and forth over the border. A lot of us still have connections with our families in the States. So it was really powerful to see the connection of family and all of these cousins back and forth in this way, that way, and cousins that had kept bonds with families for years and years and years, and some of us didn't even know that they were connected to our cousins or people that we were associated with in Hamilton. So it was just something. It just, the love of community and the respect that I have for our elders is, it's tremendous. I can't even put it into words. It's just very, very sacred, our community. Very sacred.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Um, Erin, having uh gone through reams and reams and reams of archival stuff and articles, how what is your connection to the history around freedom seekers in what we call Canada and also the USA?
Yeah, I mean, like, yeah, it's kind of overwhelming how much evidence there is, obviously, of Black presence in Canada, especially Hamilton, since like the 1700s. And obviously, a lot of it is aligned with either enslavement here or folks trying to escape from slavery in the States once it has been abolished in Canada. And like you said, Stuart Memorial was a very, very huge part of that. It was one of the stops on the Underground Railroad where people were able to come and kind of seek refuge. Um, but to answer your question, I think that, yeah, Hamilton, like it obviously makes sense because similar to like areas like St. Catharines, it's one of the kind of big Black epicenters of Southern Ontario. So it obviously makes sense that a lot of our ancestors or Black folks are going to be in those areas, especially when we're talking about times like the early 1800s, when folks are seeing Canada as now a safe haven where slavery isn't present anymore, and there's actually the opportunity for freedom and developing a new life. And I know that I'm forgetting what's the name of the house in Dundas. Do you guys know the name? I forget the
Griffin
name.
House in
Griffin House. Yeah, yeah.
Ancaster.
Griffin House.
Ancaster.
Yes.
That's
Okay. Okay. Yeah, and that's like one of it's pretty amazing that we have even, physical proof like the Griffin House to actually embody this history and kind of show that it's, Black people have been here for hundreds of years. And I think it's even more impactful because I think for a lot of folks, especially in my generation or or around my generation, the idea is often that Black folks have only been in Hamilton or in Canada since like the 60s or 70s. So essentially, like when our parents were growing up, which is just obviously not true. Like our communities have been here for literally hundreds of years, going back all the way into, the era of enslavement, all throughout, times of segregation and, um, being present in pretty much every single facet of society. So it is pretty overwhelming to kind of know that that's something that's there that's not obviously talked about, and that's why you're doing this series, Kojo, because it's not talked about enough. In the school system, in libraries around Hamilton, it's always, oh, we have these few heroes here and there, but it's kind of seen as they're the outliers as opposed to Hamilton being completely white, and there was a few Black people here, but it was very, very solid communities, like you said, that have had amazingly strong ties for generations.
Mhm. So let's stay with you, Aaron, and we'll come back to more. Like so, as somebody that Aaron, as somebody that went to school here, you've done so much stuff, so much stuff here in Hamilton. Like, where do you see this year? We are celebrating the 30th anniversary of Black History celebrations. Formally, I should put that
Mm,
formally through former MP Jean Augustine. We are also celebrating 100 years, courtesy of Kada G. Woodson, starting Black History Week, which later then became a month. Like
mhm.
as where you are right now, what's the future of Black History Month or of the history of people of African descent in Canada?
That's a big question. I mean, I can say for Black History Month, I know that. I mean, like you even said, right now it started as a week, it's become a month, and I think that we're now at the time where we're trying to, make it more than just a month and actually bring it throughout the year. Trying to put it in curriculum that's 365 is not just 1 month a year that we're touching on these things, and I think that that's one of my things that I've always grappled with Black History Month because, like, I mean, it's not super uncommon for obviously a Black person to say I like Black History Month, and the thing like it is a, like, obviously a positive force that actually allows us to remember Black history and to actually have a stronger foothold to actually remind people of hidden histories and the importance of our legacy in Canada. But I think there's also the frustration of as soon as March hits, we're not really talking about it anymore. And I think that that's something that's continually frustrating, is the idea that, yeah, schools still are, we're just talking about these things in February, which again, shortest month of the year. I'm glad that we have February, but again, we have like the most limited time possible to talk about these issues. And I would really like to see it, like I can't say this is going to happen, but I want to see it become more involved in, the secondary school system as well as the primary school system. I know that in university, folks like you, Kojo, are able to actually teach courses at McMaster and other universities focused on Black history, but I think that it's all but non-existent in a lot of our different school systems. And I think all of us have different experiences with that. It can be based on the school system, can be based on the teacher. I know that for me when I was coming up, we pretty much had nothing until I had a teacher in high school who made our law classes very Black topic centric because he knew that it was something that was intrinsically tied to the law in North America, and it was something very important to tackle. But it was pretty much limited to, conversations between me and my uncles and aunties and my parents when I was growing up, and that really ingrains something in you when you're a kid, is that these are kind of the conversations that you have at home. Like I wouldn't have even considered talking about Black history or a movie focused on, like a movie like Hidden Figures. When I was a kid, I would have never talked to my non-Black friends about it because it was always just something that I see as, oh, it's limited to my family. And I guess there can be something special about that, of that's it's a special connection that you have with your family and acknowledging your history, but it does feel limiting when I feel like we're tackling so many other histories and items in the school system, and we're kind of ignoring Black history almost entirely. We're often doing the same thing with um, the history of Indigenous folks in these areas as well. So overall, I think it's important for it to become way more ingrained in our primary, secondary school systems, and especially in Hamilton, because it's not like we have to pull examples out of nowhere. We have very, very tangible examples that are down the street from so many of these schools, like Stewart Memorial, that are still here and are still reminders of the things that have happened in Hamilton, good or bad. And it just allows kids to be more informed on these issues, whether you're Black or not. If you're Black, it's actually showing, yeah, we do have a strong foothold in this town. Even if we don't right now politically in other ways, we do have a very historical, strong foothold here. And for non-Black kids, it's important for us to realize that everything wasn't just pioneers. I mean, like, that's all that I learned about growing up, was just that the pioneers developed Canada. And I remember even going on a class trip where we spent a full day in a pioneer village, but we couldn't spend even a couple days talking about Black history or the impacts of Black people who were here the entire time. And if we want to talk about, well, were they here the entire time? Well, yeah, for as long as white people have essentially been in these areas, we have been here, whether we like it or not, as enslaved people a lot of the time. And so it's important for us to acknowledge. I think, to answer your question, where are we going as Black people in general? I don't really know. I'm hoping good places. I'm hoping, but I think in terms of history, knowing that history and knowing all that's tied to it can allow us to have more, confidence in ourselves and in our communities. I think it's why things like the John C. Holland Awards and different opportunities where we remember Black folks in Hamilton is important, because kids don't need to feel like they're the first person to do something. Obviously, it's special to be the first, but it's at some point it just becomes discouraging of having the weight on you of kind of forging that legacy. And it's a lot more comforting for kids to know that there's a lot of people who've come before you, who've kind of forged these histories, gone through the same issues of you, and have succeeded and have kind of forged that path.
Mhm. Mo, same kind of question for you. Like, you did the work. You are heavily involved in all the things that happen in Hamilton and in other cities nearby and in the states. Like, where do you see the Black history going? And are we doing a better job of letting whether it's folks in the Black community or whether it's just the general public at large, are we doing a good job of actually sharing the all the vast contributions of people of African descent?
I really don't think we're doing that good of a job. I think in Hamilton, especially not, honestly. I really don't. From other examples that I've seen in the community, and that I really don't feel it. I think one of the problems is I feel like some of the descendants of these families, it's like we're spoken of like our family, it's just history. We're still here. Hello. Like, our families are here. There's descendants to this day, right? So, and a lot of us sometimes don't know our own history as well. Like, to speak to Aaron, growing up in the city, right? Like, I there was no Black history. I would always get, "Where are you from?" I'm like, "Well,
Mm-hmm.
Hamilton." No, 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 no. Like, where are you really from? Like, well, my mom, my dad,
Mm-hmm.
my grandma was born here. Like, how far do I have to go back? All my family that I know of, they're born here, Canadian. I'm
Mm-hmm.
Canadian. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and even from our elders, I think from a lot of the oppression and colonialism and stuff, our families have had a tendency of going, "Oh, that's behind us. Leave it alone. Don't mess with that. That's, mind your business." Um, so there's been a lot of stuff like that in our community where the history's not come out. I never knew of my ancestry. Like, I knew I was a descendant, a freedom seeker family or descendant. Um, but that's not really, that's all I knew. I didn't know anything else growing up. So And not until just before COVID when I started doing a lot of research and ended up at the church. Um, I didn't know. And going to the church, I was able to find family and history. So I think moving forward, I think the city and our community needs to do a better job of including descendants and telling their stories, because if there's a different perspective that our families can give on local history, then no offense, then like the yourselves, right? Because this is our family history. It's our living history. We live it every day. These are our families, right? And we're all cousins somehow, either through marriage because we were segregated and we were forced to be in the church in that environment. That's the only place that we had to be safe. So I think the community can do better with making sure descendants are the ones telling their history, and that you will see a big difference if you have it coming from some of our families. So I'm hopeful to see something
Hmm.
move forward with more of us involved with doing something, because we're here.
Hmm.
We're resilient. We're here.
Yeah, I wanted to pick up on two things that you just mentioned, especially this question of where are you from, and I know there are folks tuning in. I think, and I say this to students too. I'm like, that question needs to be relegated to like don't ask, right? Because what it does is it really, really, really um uh, sets a demarcating line of who should be here and who should not be here, right? So I tell people, I'm like, don't even just don't ask that don't ask that question. And when you interact with people, some of these will eventually reveal themselves. But I think we should that question. I get why you're saying that, because it can be so like, why are you asking me that question, right? It's tied into like uh, so much problematic stereotypes about black, indigenous, and other folks. So if you're watching this, whether now or later, don't ask that question.
Well,
Don't ask
let me
that question.
say that was also during the 90s as well, right? And there was like, I think there was like maybe three black people in my school at Stinson Street School. So there wasn't very many black people in the school, right? Either back then. So I don't know. I'm
Hmm.
just I know
Hmm.
it's a common question we get asked, right? It is.
Yeah, and I think even and maybe Aaron, you can correct me if I'm wrong. Like I think young people still experience these questions when they are in non-black settings.
Yeah.
Am I
Yeah.
wrong?
No, no, I mean, it still happens to me, and I'm at the point where I don't even really know what to answer half the time because I'm off like I live in Hamilton, but I'm from outside of Hamilton, so sometimes I'll be like I'm from Grimsby, and I don't even understand, and then it's like, oh, okay, no, it's racial, it's racial here. But yeah, it's it's just I don't even know what to say about it because I completely get it as well that it's something that we just get used to being asked all the time, and I have the same experience where my not the exact same experience, but my family's been here since I think like the 1910s, and so it's my family is very through and through Canadian for like the past 100 years, um, and I would have the craziest amount of white kids who would just ask me like, "Oh, where are you from?" And it's like, I know where my family is from, but I don't really feel comfortable just volunteering that because I'm like, well, what are you gonna do with that now? Because rarely do you have experiences where it's like, oh, that's your family's origins. That's very interesting. It's always something weird, especially my family's Caribbean, so there's always some weird. You're doing an accent or something stereotypical, but it is just a secret way of I want to probe questions that I shouldn't ask about you because you're never going to ask somebody who looks like they're Dutch. where are you from? Because obviously they're not from here. I think we can all agree on the fact that it would be just as appropriate to ask any white person in Canada, where are you from? Because you're not originally from this land. But we don't do that because we know that it's not an appropriate question to ask, but for some reason it's seen as more appropriate because we don't look like the majority of folks in the country.
Hmm. Yeah, I tell folks, I tell some folks, I say if somebody asks you that question, the response should be, "Where are you from?"
Yeah,
Anyways, let's
it's true. It's true.
let's pick up on something else. Let's pick up on something else that you said more. I really I'm really eager to maybe have you expand a little bit, because I think, as we continue to, again, 30th anniversary of Black History Month, formally being celebrated in Canada, is still 30 years is still young, right? So it's like, what are some things that we could specifically do moving forward? I know you mentioned uh, um, hearing specific stories from descendants that have been here for hundreds and hundreds of years. I think I saw an Instagram post from someone that was asking that same question. It's like, where are the stories and the experiences of descendants of freedom seekers that have been here? So, how do we get to that point? How do we do that in a very uh, collegial way, collective way, respectful way?
That's a tough one. I think from my experience with my community, I feel like because of the oppression and the colonialism, it's like our families were oppressed and oppressed and oppressed, and then it's like it's behind us, some of them, right? So there are some families out there and some cousins and that are willing to work together. I know that would work together, but I think it needs to be a broader collaboration, and there was collaboration in the 1800s with all of our communities, to make sure that our history was told and that we did Emancipation Day celebrations as well. So there, we need to get back to those, that community root, which is very, that's very crucial in any Black community. As long as you got what food, music, you got a gathering, right? So that those basic roots of our community, as long as you get back to those basics. But I think it's a respect thing too, because our families have been so oppressed, like we've been silenced a lot, right? And a lot of our families are just like, I'm done. I just want to be free. I don't even care, and that hurts only the next generations, because then they don't know where they belong. Like myself, I didn't know any of my history because this, maybe some of the way my elders were, with our history. Ah, it's behind us. Ah, don't go bothering with that. What are you messing with that business for? Like my granny would be one person that would say stuff like that. So, I think it hurts our own community, right? And then you have people like us that try and find our roots, and we should all know where we belong in this world. Especially, it can give hope to youth, it can give hope to adults, it does so much. So I think there has to be a very strategic, respectful process done in Hamilton. I think that's going to be a little bit harder, but it's possible. All things are possible, right? There's cousins, descendants here that would be willing and able to talk about stuff. And I think when you have some of our families get together and start telling some of this history, I think it'll put a different perspective on the Black history in Hamilton, because from what I see, there's a lot missing, especially when the history is not told from the church out or from that community. There's a lot of stuff that's overlooked. Like I was listening to some of your stuff before, and I'm like, oh, I'm like, because I can see the connections between our families, like with music and musicians staying at our houses, for example. They stayed at all of our families' houses. The Duncans, the Hollands, the Washingtons. Harrison Kennedy did an interview and mentioned his family. They stayed at all of our families, right? So our families know some of these little stories, and that's where you will find these little these things start to connect together and show a bigger, complete picture that leaves no gaps for others to come in and tell it the way they want to tell it as well. It's actual
Mm-hmm.
history that way.
Mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
don't know if I answered your
So
question.
no, 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 no. I think this is good. Like for me, this has been like the whole reason why I did this lecture series, right? It's like, what are the things that we need to know, right? What are the things that we don't even know about, and how do we fill that gap for our communities, right? Like to me, I think like that's in my view, that's the next step. Like I don't want every February to be about Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, Lincoln, Alexandra. Those are all great. I'm not.
Mhm.
I don't want to get in trouble here. Those are all important, but I'm like, okay, let's go deeper, right? So
Yeah.
yes, there's the Washingtons, the Hollands, the Berries, all of that. That's a first step. Now let's go deeper. I mean, one of the things that I have been thinking about this personally too is that, you know, I we could also say, okay, what is also some of the stories from the folks that came here in the 60s and 70s? What are their specific,
100%.
right? So that's, and I think that's what you're also saying. It's like we've lost so much in these gaps, and we only have like single threads that are
Mhm.
repeated time and time again. And so everybody that's left in the gaps, there we haven't their stories haven't come up. And so sometimes too, that is another way of like, we are not doing things together in a community oriented way, right? So even for me, I'm thinking, how do we share those stories? How do we share folks that came in the 2000s? How do we share stories of folks 1990s, right? Like, how do we do all of that to ensure that we're really focused on the community centered approaches that you mentioned, and we are all yearning for. Whether it's Hamilton, Windsor. Yes, it looks like you want to say something. Go ahead.
Well, I think the one thing is that, this narrative of focusing just on certain families, I'm not undermining them. We're all cousins. But I think that really, really hurts telling our history because we're so focused just on, oh, this and it's like, well, but there's so many other people, or there was people that brought them up, right? Like for example, like with bringing in the whole diaspora, instead of going, oh, this family, and breaking it down, how about we look at what were jobs that were crucial, that employed our people in the city. Then you'll start to see it includes everybody, right?
Mhm.
Like Stelco would be one, right? You would have a certain period where there was Caribbean and our families working there as well, right? So there's ways to do it that makes an inclusive picture and makes everybody feel like they have a seat at the table, right? Which is important,
Mhm.
very important. I totally agree. um, I just feel, I think moving forward, I think our families, like I said, they're a little bit more apprehensive and a little bit more guarded with sometimes, right? Because of how how we've been raised in Canada and the climate of even Hamilton growing up here, and that, I'm sorry, but there's a lot of racism here. um let's not sugarcoat it. There still is. And I think that also speaks to this problem that we have in our community as well, right? Because it almost puts the all of us against each other and tries to divide us, right? And I've seen it with community where people are racist almost towards Caribbean people, right? Where and it's like we all should be fighting the same battle, you know. So there has to be a really, really thought out way of going about moving forward with telling the history in the city. But
Mhm.
inclusive is the biggest thing. I think inclusivity, you need to include the families of all these people.
Aaron, I'm going to complicate this a little bit. Like, as somebody that works with young people, where do you think we are missing the mark on the country, the how black young people are also being um not listened to, if I can put it that way?
Hmm.
I,
Well,
I'm not saying you
yeah.
speak on behalf of all of them, but
No, 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 no worries, no worries. No, that's fair because I mean, most of my job is talking to high school and university age youth every day, and predominantly Black students. So not that I'm speaking on behalf of them, but you spend enough time around kids that you're talking about this all the time, and I think that it does kind of lend itself to what you and Mo have been saying of that it's not really that inclusive, and I think we kind of have gotten into a habit now, which is very frustrating, of Black history is the same people being focused on, but it's also the same people being interviewed and giving speeches and stuff like that. And I've kind of found that it doesn't like I don't know, like I think like if you do consider the youth piece, obviously they have their own stories to tell, whether it's family stories and like stuff like that, but it's also seeing their lens on how this history has taken form and stuff like that, and actually seeing them studying this history. And I think that we've kind of gotten into the trend of it's mostly folks my age and up who are kind of being seen as looking at the history, talking about it, sharing it, disseminating it. And we're not really getting anyone else's lens in that. And so when it is every year we're talking about the same people and it's the same people sharing this information, it kind of defeats the purpose of Black History Month because we're now just recycling the little tidbits of Black history in Hamilton that have kind of entered the like cultural lexicon of Hamilton, like to the point that I feel like there's so like that was something that I noticed when I was doing research for the database is that there's a whole lot of everything, and there's also literally a website now that houses all this information, but we're still doing the same thing over and over and over. And it's pretty frustrating for me because I find that there's a lot of issues that I have students who are dealing with. There are a lot of identities that they have, a lot of careers they want to go into that we're not really highlighting. Like if I can't really even consider the amount of times that we've actually tackled like Black folks who are in STEM in Hamilton and actually contribute to like science, technology, and engineering. And that's not to discredit other fields, but I just think that again, if we say the same story over and over, what is the point of us doing Black History Month if we're kind of bringing up the same thing every year? And I even remember that after I worked on the project, for a couple years afterwards, I would get requests of like, "Oh, do you want to talk about this on a radio show or news?" And I'm like, "But why? Why would I do that again? Because I've already kind of shared my experience with this thing. It's now time for other folks to kind of take up space in that respect and actually have folks who have a familial connection to it or a personal connection to it. Like I think that I would love to see more opportunities where we're actually having opportunities for our elders to actually be heard and for them to actually share their stories. I feel like oftentimes we're actually only focusing on Black icons in Hamilton who aren't with us anymore, which is obviously very important. But when we're only doing that, it does, like most saying, it's kind of just relegating it to, oh, it's just history. And it's like, well, we are still here and there's people still contributing. And that's the beautiful part about doing Black History Month all year long, is that we exist here all year long. But I think that's what frustrates me, is that I think a lot of my students, obviously, we've kind of gotten now, okay, Black history is prevalent in Hamilton, but I don't think we're really looking into the nitty gritty of things and looking at personal histories and, like you said, actually interesting stories, like musicians staying at folks' houses. And like I would love to see stuff like that. I would be all over watching a YouTube series of stuff like that, because I think it's, I don't want to say it's gotten dry because that's not by any means what I'm trying to say, but it's I just wish that we were exploring new things every time, and it was something that's actually engaging students, because I when I was in high school, I was an outlier in terms of black folks who are or black teenagers who are interested in black history, and I don't think that that trend has changed a lot of youth who are actually engaged in it. I was mainly engaged in it because my aunt, my uncle kind of like nailed it into me of this is something that should be important to you in your history and actually embodying this. But it's something that I think we kind of just get used to. Well, okay, well, it's just Black History, or it's Black History Month, or you get into the trend of, oh, well, that doesn't really relate to you because our family came in the '60s and stuff like that. And I think it's a shame. I think it's really a shame because, like we always say, youth are our future. They're the ones who are going to be continuing this. So if we don't let it go and let them take this, what's going to happen? Are we just going to hold on to it until we've realized that they're not really engaged in these topics? And then we're kind of like, oh, well, I guess we're going to go through this cycle again where we have to have somebody who kind of makes it popular and interesting. But yeah, I think it needs to become more like it sounds kind of like I don't know what the word is, but to say like I think we should be focusing more on elders as well as youth. I think it's important to have both of those voices in there because it's youth are way more in tune with things like social media and new technologies and stuff, and could find way more creative ways to engage us in Black history and current Black stories. But it's kind of like an untapped market right now because they're either not engaged because they never really learned about it in school, or we're not really giving the opportunity to kind of say, okay, it's in your hands. You guys do a cool project for Black History Month, and you guys will be the ones on the stage presenting this stuff and everything. I would love to see that.
Mhm. This has me thinking of a number of things. Um, it's like, some of the students that I teach, and Aaron took one of my classes. Aaron took one. I always like ask them, do you know about what happened in St. George, Sir William George University in Montreal? Most people will say no. And I think the challenge is, and I think Aaron mentioned this, there's the curriculum piece, right? And then there's also the piece of like uh the histories are there's a multitude of histories, and who's responsible, or who is the, I don't want to say, yeah, who's responsible for that stewardship of like, how do we ensure everyone in the we're sharing stories from youth, we're making sure they understand the histories, the legacies, all of that. And I think that's what at least I'm hearing from both of you, is how do we bridge all of this um together. Mo, do you have any other additional comments before we move on to our final section?
Well, I think we need to get back to networking with other communities that do Black history. I think if you look at some of the communities in Windsor and Chatham and Emmitsburg and Buxton and Dresden, if you look at them, they all work together. And that tells the story better because there's no way to get gaps and let, like I always like that African proverb, until the lion tells its story, the story will always glorify the hunter. And that's what we've created with how we're telling history. So if we look to other communities that do a really well, set a good example for the rest of us to tell Black history, I think that's a start. And then I also think reaching out to some of our cousins in the States, especially with how the times are, and because that cross border connection is still there, and with a lot of these people that are even in Hamilton, I can tell you of ties even into the States, right? Wilma Morrison, she was at the Harriet Tubman House in Albany. They knew her when I went there. So, like those, bringing back those old ties of community is important. Very, that's it. We got to work together as a network. But
Mhm.
look to other communities for examples as well, and what they're doing
Hmm.
Mhm.
around us.
Yeah. I'm just gonna look at the chat because I see some folks we're saying a couple of things. Informative and very moving. One of the challenges of featuring this work in Ontario schools is the use of survey history courses in which we touch lightly on the past from Adam to the atom. Yeah. And then Eli, hey, what's up, Eli? Eli said, I remember doing a similar trip to the Pioneer Village. So, Aaron, you're not,
Classic,
you're not the
Maple
only.
syrup.
classic, classic. I hope it's over soon.
Oh man, that's like I'm sure as soon as you said it, Eli was, I went there too.
Classic.
And then hey Heather, what's up? How are you? Heather is it appropriate? Um hold on a second. My screen is it appropriate if the conversation is comfortable, not with a complete stranger, and as part of getting to know someone to ask what is your heritage? Um, yeah. So I think this is going back to the question about where are you from. Like, do any of you want to answer that? Or
I think I think right off the bat, the phrasing already is more appropriate because even like I said, when you say like where are you from, sometimes I don't even know it, and that's why people say it because it sounds like a simple question. Like you're being like, "What town are you from?" Like it's kind of posed as like a very simple question and not an intimate question, and that's why I say like if it's somebody I don't really know, I don't really want to tell you where my family's from because it's like a not that it's not that there's anything bad with it, but it's like that's my personal information. Whereas again, if it is a friend or someone that you're close with, it's it's a it's a big part of your life. It's the same as asking about like somebody's relationship with their parents or something. Like if you have that level of connection with someone and if you're asking it in a respectful way, like where's your personal heritage from? But I think the issue is that it's being at it we're acting like it's just a chill regular question when it's actually very invasive. So I react completely differently if I have a friend who, oh, what island are you from? Da, 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 versus some guy on the streets like, you look ethnically ambiguous. I'm gonna test the waters here because we love to just chat in Hamilton. We love to just spark up a conversation, but it's like not about that. Like, ask me about the weather. Like not where am I from? Like it's too loaded.
Mhm.
But where
Mo.
are you really from?
Yeah, yeah. It's like
Where are
it's a
you really from?
two-parter. It's a two-part question, and they're acting like it's not.
Yeah, 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 yeah. What are you hinting at? Maybe let's just change the narrative. Where are you from?
Yeah,
Or hey, my family's been here for many generations. I don't know. What are you getting at? I don't
it's
know.
true. It's true.
So it reminds me of I'm reading this book for those of you if you've been tuning in every week I show a book for people to read. So this is The Long Road Home on Blackness and Belonging by Deborah Thompson. And she there's a section there where she's in the hospital. She's in the hospital sitting there reading a book. And uh a white man, elderly white man, is sitting next to her at the hospital, and he was just itching to ask a question, and one of the first questions was, "Where are you from?" And Deborah also in the book she says it's like, you know your first inclination is like it's just like, somebody just wants to know. But then when you think about it, you're like, well, are you asking me because of how I look or what I'm doing, or so I think, Heather, it's like, I don't think that should be the first question when you meet someone. After you've met them, and there's conversations, maybe it might come up, and if it comes up naturally, that's even when it's okay. Oh yeah, yeah, I'm da 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 da, and you're like, oh, okay, my family too is da 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 da, right? But I feel like, if it's the first line of question when you see somebody, um yeah, it has historical, a historical baggage with it. Whether what and if you notice, that's why in the second lecture series I talked about Canada's past in terms of immigration, who is allowed here and who is not allowed, right? In 1910, immigration, they're like, hey, we don't want black folks here because they're unsuitable for the Canadian weather. So, in that historical context, when you ask somebody, like, where are you from? Yeah, it might feel like you're just asking them, like, I just want to know, but there's historical context to it. And when you add in the fact that there have been black people, people of African descent in this country from the 1600s to now, and they are being asked the same that question, now it feels heavy. Anyways, so Heather, I hope we were able to clarify that a little bit. If not, reach out to me and we can have a chat. uh we just have 5 minutes, folks, so I wanted to do this from ask a question, and both of you can respond. How do we transition from Black History Month to Black Futures? How do you see that happening? Because to me, those are some of the things that I'm also thinking about. And, like, how do we, like, you know smoothly make that Black Futures, I don't want to call it a transition, but I feel like, how do we start rethinking the things we do throughout the year and in February? Who wants to? Okay, Mo, you want to start first, and then Aaron.
I think I pretty much already answered that one. The way I feel is network, get back to basics with community, lifting up the voices of maybe the voices of some of our community members that aren't as strong, and being more respectful as black people in general. We need to be more respectful to different culture, different parts of our culture. Um, and yeah, I think networking with other places and into the states, like I can even think of like Buffalo, New York Underground Railroad Museum, amazing. Saldine is awesome. Um, like all the way up to Windsor and Detroit, like we can do something that tells a better picture and really does our history some justice of past and present
Hmm.
community people, right?
Hmm.
Collaboration between all of us. It really needs to come back to community.
Hmm.
Really does.
Okay,
That's it for me.
Aaron.
Yeah, I think that I can echo most points on connection, and that I think, I think we need to get back to a place of not being so focused on extractive information and, being less focused on, making a textbook of things or something, and being more focused on the stories and actually seeing where that can kind of take us, and, involving elders and youth all the way along the way, because I feel like they oftentimes have the most important, most unique, and most creative ideas related to these things. And being able to just, hand off the reins and see, let's see where this goes. We're going to need to do it at some point with Black History and Black History Month and everything like that. We're going to need to give the reins to the youth at some point. So we might as well start giving them a little practice now of seeing what are your ideas about our legacy? What do you want to do with this? How do we kind of move forward with this now?
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. Well, I just want to say thank you very much to both of you for spending your Thursday evening with us. I can see that a number of folks really enjoyed the conversation from the chat, and there will be people that watch this later on. So I just wanted to say thank you very much to both of you. And to everyone else that's watching, we have one more session, folks, and that's it. So next week, we have Mara Benjamin, the site supervisor for Griffin House. We talked about Griffin House today. So they're going to tell us, give us an update on what's happening at Griffin House at some point, I think this year or early next year, is supposed to open. So they'll provide that information. And then we have, speaking of young people, we have a high school student, Dante Helen, who is going to join us next week to talk about some of the work that he's been doing here in Hamilton. So that's what we can expect for next week. Thank you, Mo. Thank you, Aaron, and thank you to
Thank you.
everyone that tuned in this evening. We appreciate you. We love you. Take care, and we will see you next week, same time.